So that's my apple dumpling a la mode. I hope you try the recipe. Hi everyone, we're gonna make Memere's apple dumplings. This is a recipe from my mother-in-law, Yvonne, so I'm gonna give a big shout out to my mother-in-law. This is a family favorite. She made these all the time, and I make them now because it's actually an easy way to get a delicious dessert that's almost like an apple pie, but easier than an apple pie. So I hope you try this recipe. And once again, thank you, Memere Eddie. We're going to get our apples ready. I usually use Golden Delicious apples for this recipe, but today I have Honeycrisp apples, so you can use any apple you like, but there are some apples that are better for baking and for apple pies and apple dumplings. So use anything you like. Once you have your apples peeled, you want to cut them up into smaller pieces, and I'll show you that, but you want to put them with lemon juice. All right, so that's a way to keep your apples from turning brown and oxidizing, and don't worry, they won't taste too lemony. It won't ruin the recipe as long as you don't overdo it. So I probably have about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice in this bowl, and I keep stirring my apples so they don't turn brown. Here comes the apple inspector. Every time I cut an apple, Mr. Buster is always here. Hey Buster, do you want to have an apple? Come over here. Over here, sit. Sit down. All right, give you a little piece of apple. Okay, sit. Oh, there you go. All right. How do those apples taste? They taste good? Is that okay? All right, that's it. That's it. They're all gone. That's it. You ate them all. I'm out of apples. Huh. You even know the word apple, don't you? So funny. When I bake now, I actually weigh out a lot of my ingredients instead of just measuring them with a measuring cup, because if it's very humid or very warm out, that can change the weight of your flour. So it's actually improved my cooking, and I rely on it now. Okay, so I need 2 cups of flour, and each cup of flour weighs approximately 125 grams. So on my scale, I'm gonna measure 250, and make sure if you buy one of these, you pay attention to the units. So I have it set for grams, and I've also tared the container. So you have to make sure you have your measuring vessel. It could be a bowl, but I'm using a measuring cup. All right, so it's 0 grams. Okay, this is all-purpose flour. So I'm going to keep going until the number goes up to 250. So that's already at 1 cup. Yep, 252. All right, that's close enough. All right, so 250 grams, give or take a couple of grams is okay. Again, you have to watch your units. All right, so I've been doing the weighing for quite a while, and this is a new measuring cup for me. So the metric units are a lot more accurate. Okay, so we're gonna go over the ingredients for the pastry, for the dumpling. Right, we have 2 cups of flour, we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a cup of milk, and half a teaspoon of salt, and 3/4 of a cup of crisco. So we are making like a pie crust, but it's going to be a very soft dough. That's because of the milk. All right, so very similar to a pie crust or a pie dough, but much more forgiving, all right? Okay, so I'm first going to sift all my dry ingredients together. So I'm gonna put in my 2 cups of flour. My baking powder. Make sure I get all of it. All right, here's my salt. All right, so I'm going to sift all that together. I'm going to show you how I use my food processor. It's very simple and very reliable, so it's a lot less intimidating. So if you're not a confident cook, you might want to try this technique. If not, you can just mix everything in a bowl. Okay, so I'm going to add my sifted dry ingredients right to my food processor. I have the metal blade attachment in here. You can use the plastic attachment if you prefer. All right, I'm going to add my 3/4 cup of Crisco. Now, it's usually better to have your Crisco cut up into smaller pieces. So I'm not going to add this all in one big block like this. And I do this with my pie crust as well. So the rule of thumb is the colder your shortening or butter is, the better your pie crust will come out. So this is right out of the refrigerator. All right, so I'm going to add those in chunks. So this makes about 8 dumplings. So I'm going to pulse this probably a good 20 or 30 times. All right, so and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the shortening and the flour to combine together to get cut in together, and your flour will start to look like cornmeal. I think I'm up to 18 right now. I lost count. It's starting to look like that right now. I'm going to take this cover off and I'll show you. All right, so instead of it being fluffy, what's happening now, it's starting to look almost like a sand or a cornmeal. That's what you want. All right, so get that in there. Having cold shortening helps this happen. So keep going. I'm just going to do a couple more times. All right, so now, whoops, I'm going to add my milk. All right, so I'm going to do it through the top here, and I'm going to add my milk slowly. So this is a 1/2 cup of milk. You can use any kind of milk you want. All right, there's no eggs in this recipe, so if you have problems with eggs. All right, so I'm going to add the flour a little bit at a time. Add a little bit more. Keep pulsing. And pretty quickly, this is going to start coming together. It's already coming together. Oops. So this is a much wetter dough than a pie crust dough. Yeah, the rest of my milk. Take my dough out of the bowl and put it in the bowl here. Be careful of that blade, right? So you can see the dough. Some of it is stuck near the bottom. So this is one of the limitations of using the food processor. When I make my apple pie crust this way, it's not as wet as this. So don't feel you did anything wrong if the dough looks too wet. That's going to be fine. Okay, so I have my dough all ready from the food processor, and again, I had mentioned how wet this dough is, so we're going to put it in the refrigerator and let it come together. And I do this with my pie crust as well. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad. It's going to hold together. Putting it in the refrigerator just allows the fat, the shortening, to get colder, and then it's going to make a nicer pie crust when I roll it out with my rolling pin. Another big part of this recipe is there's a syrup that goes over the dumplings while they're baking. Okay, so I'm going to weigh out our sugar. All right, so I need 1 cup of sugar, so that's 200 grams. You can see I'm already up to 65. I don't know if you can see that. I'm up to 118. And I had to calibrate things because I didn't want to trust that this worked. I don't know why. All right, so we're at 193, so there we go, close to 198. Come on, 200, perfect. All right, so in my measuring cup, if I did this by eye, I might have had more than 200 because I'm really not flush with that. All right, so measuring with a scale in the kitchen, especially for baking, is a lot more accurate, and it has improved my baking. So maybe you can try it too. All right, so now we have all the ingredients for our syrup. We have 1 cup of sugar, 2 cups of water. We have half a teaspoon of cinnamon and half a teaspoon of nutmeg. All right, you can adjust the cinnamon and the nutmeg to your taste. I tend to put a little bit more cinnamon than what the recipe calls for, but nutmeg, I keep it to half a teaspoon. All right, so we're going to mix our syrup together. So this stays cold. This is just something you're going to pour over your dumplings once they're completed. All right, and I usually make this while the dumpling dough is cooling in the refrigerator. All right, so just put your 1 cup of sugar in your water, and then add your cinnamon and nutmeg. All right, mix it together. So this doesn't want to combine very well. The cinnamon and the nutmeg really don't dissolve. They just kind of float. But try to get your sugar to dissolve in your water as much as possible. You want that to be somewhat of a uniform solution or mixture, right? But your cinnamon is just going to fight you. It's going to float on the top. The nutmeg's going to float on the top, right? We do not make a syrup on top of the stove with this. We just pour this over the dumpling. All right, so the word syrup, I think we could come up with a better word. Okay, that's it. Just leave it on the side. Okay, so I have my syrup ready. I have my apples all cut up. I'm going to go check the pastry in the refrigerator. All right, so I'm working on that second batch. Thought I had the camera on for all of it. So, all right, so I'm gonna pick up that dough. Careful. Put it in there. And my apples. Seems to just work out. All right, so this is about 4 medium-sized apples. Okay. Again, you can put as many apples as you like. Let me give that guy another one. Okay. Just want to make sure I didn't run out. Oh, forgot. I'm going to put my cinnamon mixture in there. Okay. Okay, last one. Pick up my dough, put it over here, okay, and just roll it out. So it doesn't matter what shape it is when you roll it out, just roll it out as thin as you can. This is the hard part, trying to pick it up without it falling apart. Okay. All right, put the last of my apples in there. And I think you're going to go back over here. All right, and then the last of my cinnamon mixture goes in there. Get rid of all this stuff. Close up the dumpling. I have the best camera angle on this for you. So you're going to notice it looks like there's this big divide in the middle. These are going to actually fill in the whole thing. All right, so it's kind of a wonderful recipe. What we're going to do is we're simply going to pour our syrup over this entire dish. All right, so here's my syrup, which is just the water, sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg. I just mix it up again. I think more of the cinnamon has started to go into the mixture, so that's good. Okay, so just mix it up really well. Right, and I like to pour it right over all of them. Make sure all that was a pretty saturated solution of sugar and water, so let's get all of that sugar out. All right, and the next step is to add some margarine or butter to each one of these, and then I'll bake it. So the recipe just says add margarine. All right, so that's my mother-in-law for you. All right, so she probably just knew how much margarine to use. So I'm probably just going to use 2 tablespoons of margarine for the whole recipe, and I'm going to cut them in quarters. I'm going to put 1/4 of a tablespoon on each dumpling. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. And maybe there's an apple dumpling recipe out there that has the exact amount, but mine doesn't. Okay, so I cut it in half. Make sure your margarine's cold. Right, and I'm just going to put it right on the top. You can tell the difference. Margarine just feels fake. All right, so I've been using more butter in most of my cooking. I think it's better for you as well. All right, so that's it. Add your margarine to each dumpling. You have the syrup in there. One of the apples escaped. That's okay. All right, and I'm going to put it on the lower rack. So I'm going to let it bake uncovered for 35 minutes. I'm going to check it at 35 minutes. Okay. All right, ovens at 375. Put on the lower rack. Set my timer for 35 minutes. We're set to take this out of the oven. It's been cooking for 35 minutes. Okay, so just like magic, it's all filled in, all that syrup and the pastry. All right, so all of that pastry now has expanded and the syrup has cooked into all of the dumplings. All right, so we have 8 dumplings here. And they're gonna be delicious. I'll show you when I serve it. This is the finished product. These are my apple dumplings. I brought them to a friend's house because it's way too much for just us. All right, so it's great if you can heat them up too. All right, so let's see if I can grab one of the first ones the hardest. Okay, like that. I'm gonna put a little ice cream on it. All right, you don't need the ice cream, but if you want the ice cream, oh, that's a lot. Okay, how's that? All right, so that's my apple dumpling a la mode. I hope you try the recipe.